We are walking in the light of God. We are walking in the light of God. Hi, Pastor Nathan Decker with your hashtag Better Together devotion for today. And we've been talking about the Lord's Prayer, and we've been talking about what prayer means when we have a conversation with God. We have a conversation with Jesus about what prayer is. And one of the lines within the Lord's Prayer that talks about how we live in that kingdom come, how we live in the heaven on earth model that Jesus is teaching us, is to follow God's lead. Now, it says in a different way, it says, lead us not into temptation. Well, if we're asking God to not lead us in the way of temptation, we're actually also conversely asking God to lead us in paths of righteousness. There's a Psalm 23, I think, that has something to do about that. So, when you think about leadership in terms of following Jesus, when we think about being a disciple of Jesus Christ, one of the things that means is that we are giving up authority. We're submitting our will to God. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of work in terms of discernment and choice making. We have a lot that still happens there. We have a lot of decision making that still happens in our lives. But it does mean that becomes that much more harder because now we are no longer making these decisions. We're no longer making these choices alone. We are now making them in striving to follow Jesus, striving to follow God's path, striving to follow God's leadership. Now, in our world, people want authority a lot. Pastors want authority, politicians want authority, business people want authority, Facebook wants authority, YouTube wants you to sign an end user agreement, and so they have authority. There's all sorts of this authority grabbing. But the reality is that when it comes to our faith is one of not striving to gain power and grab authority, but instead ours is one to release it unto God, and to strive to follow Christ in this path so that we don't fall into the paths of temptation, but instead are delivered from evil. We're called to follow God's lead. And following God's lead is what it means to be faithful. In fact, the word in the Greek, pisteuo, faith, I am faithful, it has this connotation of literally following someone. Someone's in front of me and I am following them. That is what it means to be faithful. I'm following their vision. I'm following their understanding of the world. I'm following God. I have to be humble about this because I have to strive to understand what that means. And not all of us are going to have the same understanding, obviously. Look at human beings. But we all do need to strive earnestly and diligently with discernment and prayer to follow God. Only through prayer, only through getting a glimpse of that heavenly vision can we truly understand where we are going with God's leadership, with God's authority, with God's love. This is Pastor Nathan Decker encouraging you to spend time in prayer about your life and asking the question, Lord, how can I follow you? Lead me today. Amen.